Burkina Faso, a small West African nation often ignored on the global stage, has just unveiled a series of bold breakthroughs. A saltwater to freshwater purification system, Africa's first military-grade electric truck, and real-time drone technology that can plow crops and monitor soil conditions with surgical precision. This isn't about catching up, it's about leapfrogging. It's a message to the world. Africa is not waiting anymore. Under the leadership of President Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso is sending a clear signal: the age of dependency is ending, and a new chapter of African self-reliance is beginning. These aren't imported ideas. They're homegrown answers to African challenges, made by African hands, for African futures. If you believe that this continent deserves more than headlines of despair, if you see the power in this rise, subscribe now and stay until the end. While most of the world debates the future of electric vehicles in boardrooms and billion-dollar factories, something extraordinary just happened in Burkina Faso, a country with no major car industry, no sprawling manufacturing zones, and no seat at the G20 table. In the past few months, this small West African nation has achieved what even wealthier nations still struggle to accomplish. In a single strategic move, Burkina Faso introduced 3 game-changing technologies, all designed, built, and deployed by local engineers. First, a saltwater to freshwater purification system developed to combat the growing threat of water scarcity in the Sahel region. Using minimal energy, this innovation transforms saline and brackish water into clean, drinkable water for thousands of rural families. Second, the first electric military truck ever built in Africa. Powered by silent, zero-emission motors, these rugged vehicles are designed not just for sustainability, but for tactical advantage in remote or hostile environments. In a region where logistical infrastructure is limited, this is a breakthrough in self-sufficient defense mobility. Third, precision farming drones, capable of autonomously seeding crops and monitoring soil moisture in real time. These aren't copy-paste imports from Asia or Europe. They are uniquely tailored to African soil types, climate variability, and farming practices. And here's the most remarkable part: none of this came from foreign aid or multinational corporations. These are homegrown Burkinabe solutions, born out of necessity, engineered with determination, and deployed with a vision of self-reliance. At the center of this movement is a bold and uncompromising leader, President Ibrahim Traoré, who has made it clear that Burkina Faso will no longer be defined by what it lacks, but by what it builds. For most people in the West, the idea that Burkina Faso, a landlocked nation with limited infrastructure, low GDP, and no formal car industry, could manufacture a military-grade electric truck or a real-time AI-enabled drone sounds impossible. And that's exactly what makes this story so powerful. There were no billion-dollar factories, no foreign research labs, no global investment rounds, just local engineers, farmers, soldiers, and students building from scratch. It began under the leadership of President Ibrahim Traoré, whose administration openly rejected the passive model of development dictated by international donors. Instead of chasing grants or importing temporary fixes, his team mobilized internal resources, technical universities, vocational schools, and military workshops. These institutions, often overlooked or underfunded, became the backbone of an indigenous tech revolution. In partnership with small teams of Burkinabe inventors and technicians, they focused not on luxury, but on necessity. They didn't build these machines to impress the world. They built them because no one else was going to do it for them. A young engineer, interviewed anonymously due to security concerns, described it best: "We didn't build because we had the money, we built because we had the need. If we waited for permission, we'd still be thirsty and unarmed." This mindset, radical self-determination, is what turned a near-impossible vision into working prototypes, and now fully deployed systems. And it wasn't just about the machines. It was about breaking psychological barriers. For decades, Africa has been fed the lie that real innovation comes from the outside, that high-tech must be imported, licensed, and copied. Burkina Faso just crushed that myth. But the world did not immediately applaud. When the news finally reached international circles, the response was telling not of excitement, but of confusion. Western media outlets, so quick to cover crises in Burkina Faso, offered only muted mentions, if any at all. Analysts, who had long written off the country as unstable or irrelevant, now faced an uncomfortable question: how did they miss this? In some policy think tanks across Europe and the US, quiet conversations began. Could this be the early signs of African tech nationalism? Could other countries follow suit, rejecting dependency and building their own solutions? Meanwhile, on the African continent, the reaction was anything but silent. From Mali to Ghana, from Uganda to Guinea, leaders and civil society groups began taking notice. Burkinabe engineers were invited to speak at regional development summits. Students in Dakar, Bamako, and Accra started sharing photos of the electric truck and asking, "Why not us?" Social media across Africa lit up with hashtags like Number Africa Can Build and Number Traoré Tech, celebrating what many saw not just as innovation, but as liberation. And perhaps the most powerful impact was psychological. For the first time in a long time, an African government wasn't begging for permission or copying someone else's model. It was setting its own path and succeeding. One editorial from a Nigerian columnist summed it up perfectly. This is not just a win for Burkina Faso. It's a warning shot to the rest of Africa. The age of excuses is over. For President Ibrahim Traoré, the reaction only reinforced what he had already believed: that Africa's future would not be handed to it. It would have to be built piece by piece with African minds and African hands. Innovation isn't real until it touches people's lives. And in Burkina Faso, these new technologies aren't sitting in glass cases or government showrooms, they're already changing daily life. In rural communities where clean water was once a dream, saltwater purification units are now providing families with fresh, drinkable water. Local farmers no longer have to walk hours to fetch water from unreliable wells. Children are falling sick less often. Teachers report higher school attendance. And in a country where climate change has made agriculture increasingly difficult, this one invention has become a lifeline. Meanwhile, in the heart of farming villages, drones buzz quietly above fields, seeding crops with precision and alerting farmers when soil moisture drops too low. These drones aren't just high-tech gadgets, they're part of a national food security strategy. They save labor, reduce waste, and improve crop yields, especially for smallholder farms. But perhaps the most visible symbol of change is the military electric truck. When it first rolled through the streets of Ouagadougou, people didn't cheer because it was electric. They cheered because it was theirs, designed, built, and operated by Burkinabe hands, not foreign forces. For many, it marked a turning point. We are no longer just consumers. We are creators. At universities and technical schools across the country, enrollment in engineering, robotics, and applied sciences has surged. Students are inspired not by Silicon Valley fantasies, but by real success stories happening within their borders. Teachers are reporting a renewed sense of purpose. Workshops are full, and local media now profiles engineers with the same pride once reserved for soccer stars. Even in markets and homes, the language is changing. People are no longer asking when foreign investors will save them. They're asking, what else can we build? The success of these innovations has done more than shift public morale. It's reshaping the political narrative inside Burkina Faso. Under the leadership of President Ibrahim Traoré, the government has doubled down on its vision of national self-sufficiency. His administration has announced new investments in local manufacturing hubs, vocational training centers, and regional tech incubators, not just in the capital, but across rural provinces. Instead of relying on Western contractors or NGOs, Traoré is empowering local cooperatives, university researchers, and retired military engineers to lead production and scale these technologies nationally. These are not public relations gimmicks. They are part of a coherent strategy to decentralize innovation and restore national dignity through practical sovereignty. Politically, this bold approach has reframed public discourse. Opposition parties that once accused the administration of isolationism are now under pressure to explain why prior regimes failed to deliver even a fraction of these advancements. Critics are finding it harder to gain traction when farmers, students, and engineers are seeing real results in their own communities. Regionally, Burkina Faso's assertive stance is inspiring a quiet policy revolution. In meetings of the Sahel Alliance and West African regional blocs, the country is no longer viewed as the underdog, but as a test case for a new model of African development. Build first, negotiate later. Some neighboring countries, like Mali and Guinea, have already expressed interest in replicating aspects of the Burkinabe model. Joint production agreements for water purification units and agricultural drones are under discussion, potentially opening the door for a homegrown West African technology network that doesn't rely on Paris, Beijing, or Washington. For President Ibrahim Traoré, this is more than domestic reform, it is a continental calling. One senior advisor was quoted saying, "We're not just building machines, we're building a mindset. If we succeed here, the rest of Africa will follow." In Washington and other Western capitals, Burkina Faso has rarely made headlines unless it involved military coups, terrorism, or humanitarian crises. But now, in closed-door policy briefings and international development circles, a new question is emerging. Did we just get blindsided by African innovation? For decades, the West operated under a comfortable assumption: Africa would remain a market, not a maker of technology. Western NGOs would deliver clean water, Western companies would sell vehicles, Western expertise would guide agriculture. And suddenly, Burkina Faso shattered that model not with foreign funding, but with indigenous ingenuity. In Washington's think tanks, early reports are raising eyebrows. Some experts are calling this the Burkina shock. The realization that a country previously seen as dependent is now setting precedents in green military transport, water sustainability, and climate-resilient agriculture. This raises uncomfortable implications. If Burkina Faso can do this with limited capital and under sanctions, what happens if larger African economies follow suit? What happens if Africa begins to build without permission? In US tech circles, there's also quiet discomfort. While Silicon Valley talks endlessly about solving global problems, Burkinabe engineers actually solve them for their own people, using local knowledge and modest tools. That reality challenges the narrative that innovation must come from the north. Even the defense community is paying attention. A military-grade electric vehicle produced outside of NATO's supply chains, in a region rich in critical minerals, that's not just innovation, that's geopolitical autonomy. The US State Department, once dismissive of Traoré's anti-imperialist rhetoric, now finds itself reassessing its stance. As one former diplomat put it, they're not anti-West, they're just pro-themselves. And we don't have a playbook for that. It's no longer just about Burkina Faso. It's about what its boldness reveals, that the future of innovation and independence might not come from those who have the most, but from those who have nothing left to lose. Across academia and global policy forums, the story of Burkina Faso's breakthrough is being dissected with growing interest. Scholars specializing in African development and geopolitics describe this moment as a potential pivot point where the continent moves from passive aid recipient to active technology creator. A respected African studies professor at a major US university commented, "This is not just a technological achievement, it's a political statement about sovereignty and self-determination." Burkina Faso is demonstrating what's possible when leadership rejects dependency and prioritizes homegrown solutions. Analysts note that the innovations align closely with Africa's unique challenges: water scarcity, fragile security environments, and agricultural instability due to climate change. Unlike imported solutions that often fail to fit local conditions, Burkina Faso's approach embodies contextual intelligence. Moreover, this marks a shift in the global innovation landscape. Traditional tech hubs in North America, Europe, and Asia now face a new competitor: a West African country with a laser focus on practical, sustainable technologies for its people. Geopolitical strategists warn that if this model spreads, it could disrupt existing supply chains and influence global power balances. Access to critical minerals used in electric vehicles and drones is abundant in Africa, but now, with local manufacturing, the continent could move from resource exporter to technology producer. In Washington, Berlin, and Beijing, conversations are increasingly focused on how to engage with an Africa that no longer fits old paradigms. As one policy expert put it, Burkina Faso's rise challenges us to rethink development, aid, and partnership not as charity, but as mutual respect for innovation wherever it happens. The question remains: will Burkina Faso be the spark that ignites a continental renaissance? Or will this be seen as an isolated success in an often fractured region? Only time will tell, but for now, Burkina Faso and President Ibrahim Traoré have firmly announced Africa's arrival on the global innovation stage. What makes Burkina Faso's achievements even more extraordinary is how they were accomplished not by waiting for foreign aid or international approval, but through a bold, independent strategy conceived by President Ibrahim Traoré himself. Behind the scenes, Traoré launched what insiders call the National Self-Reliance Plan. In early 2023, this blueprint rejected traditional reliance on IMF loans, foreign direct investment, or donor-driven programs. Instead, it focused on mobilizing domestic resources, including the country's military engineers, technical universities, and youth labor forces. Rather than outsourcing production, Traoré harnessed the skills of local craftsmen and innovators. The army workshops were converted into manufacturing hubs. Vocational schools shifted curricula toward applied technologies tailored to national needs. Even local communities were engaged in testing and improving prototypes. This approach was revolutionary in a region where dependency often feels like an inescapable cycle. Traoré's vision wasn't just about technology, it was about reclaiming political and economic sovereignty. It was about building a future where Burkina Faso no longer needed to beg for solutions, but created them. As one senior advisor explained, we are not waiting for anyone's permission. We are standing on our own 2 feet, building the tools to do so. This strategic independence has shaken more than just Burkina Faso's borders, it has sent ripples through the global power structure. By refusing external control over technology and resources, President Ibrahim Traoré is redefining what leadership in Africa can look like. No longer a passive recipient of aid, he is emerging as a symbol of African self-determination and technological sovereignty. International powers watching from afar face a new reality: a leader who wields not only political authority, but also the power of indigenous innovation. The electric military trucks, purification systems, and drones aren't just machines, they are instruments of geopolitical autonomy. This unexpected rise has made Traoré a beacon for other African leaders frustrated by the constraints of foreign dependency. His model offers a roadmap for a continent tired of being relegated to the sidelines of global progress. Some analysts have dubbed this the Traoré effect, a shift toward homegrown technology as a new form of soft power in Africa. In the years to come, Traoré's legacy may be remembered not just for his policies, but for igniting a movement that changed the narrative of what African nations can achieve on their own terms. Burkina Faso stands at a historic crossroads, a nation reborn through courage, vision, and unwavering determination. Its people are no longer waiting for salvation from afar. They are shaping their own destiny, fueled by the leadership of President Ibrahim Traoré. Clean water flows where there was drought. Electric trucks patrol where gasoline once ruled. Drones nurture the fields that feed a nation. This is not just progress, it's a renaissance. As Traoré himself, the leader of the freedom movement, has boldly declared, "We do not wait for permission to be free. Freedom is not something to be begged for, but a sacred right that we will rise up to claim with courage and an iron will." The awakening spirit of Burkina Faso is not just the story of one nation, but a call that resonates from the depths of the soul of every African. A bright future awaits, where the continent is not only a witness, but also the author of its sovereignty, a storyteller of its own story, drawing its own destiny with its own hands and heart. If you feel this call touching your soul, if you believe in the power of unity, in the light of faith and freedom, let us join hands to convey this message to everyone. Subscribe. Tell your family, friends, and the world about the truth that goes beyond the daily news, so that stories of awakening, resilience, and hope can be spread far and wide. We are not just witnesses, but companions, enablers of an awakened continent. A continent that stands tall, heads held high and ready to rise, no longer bowed down or submissive. It is time for Africa to wake up, to reclaim its place on the world map with pride, strength, and relentless ambition. May God, the Most High, bless Africa, its brave people, its big dreams, and the great journey that lies ahead.